Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hexodus. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Persephone.
We're excited to have you with us today. Today, we're going to be talking about faith and faith shifts. But before we get into it, for our sacrament this week, we are going to pull some cards to replace the sacrament that we have been doing. And the card reading is going to be our sacrament. So, Persephone, if you want to go first.
Sure. Okay, so I've got a deck here. I'm using the Mystical Moments Tarot deck. And I'm just going to pull a couple for this podcast episode. All right. And thank you for tuning back in. I'm glad to have everybody here. Okay, so very interesting. So it's very much, we pulled cards right before this, just for Jenny and I, just to get ready. And this is kind of like a lot like that in some ways. So very interesting. So we got the Page of Wands, which is like a new start on something that you're passionate about and just something that kind of like lights you up almost before you start it, like going to the starting line of a race, but you haven't started to run yet, but it's there. And the Empress, which is the divine feminine. So
I
she and
love
I drew,
that.
I know, she and I just drew the Emperor card right before this, the divine masculine. And we talked about having like the balance between the masculine and feminine. And here we go. We got the divine feminine card. So I think that's like really cool. Just talking about being in balance and living a passionate life and having wholeness and fullness in yourself. So I think that's lovely.
I think that is a wonderful message. That is definitely what we want to send out there for
Yeah.
ourselves and for people who are listening.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. For my card, I am pulling from my Vintage Wisdom Oracle deck.
So pretty.
And I love this deck. I love it. Okay, the one that called to me was Freedom.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's
That
the perfect
just
one for faith shifts.
right.
Yes.
It really
Yes.
is. It's been the faith card, then that would have been like ultimate perfection. But freedom, I feel like, is a very, very much right up there. Just this idea of faith and faith shifts, how that can bring you freedom, finding faith in yourself versus being told to have faith in something that maybe doesn't serve you.
Yes. 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 Beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Ah, well, those are some great cards that we got.
Yes. And so I guess we can start with just talking about a faith shift. I guess when you are in a high demand religion or a religion that has like a high degree of control over its members, like the Mormon church, like Jenny and I were part of, we are not taught about faith shifts. I didn't know it was even a thing. All we were taught about is like you're lazy, you're wanting to sin, your life's going to fall apart, you're going to lose everything. And that's just what we were fed all the time. And that's just like, that's what happens when you leave the church.
Yep.
So when I started my faith shift, I was like, what the hell is this? Because I don't like I don't even know what's going on. So like a lot of the times when you have a faith shift from a high demand religion, you just don't even know what is actually happening to you or where this will end up. And it's just really difficult. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about our processes and our own faith shifts and just a little bit about faith shifts themselves. Okay, so I guess we were just talking about that there are many kinds of faith shifts because everyone does it differently. But we were talking about two that are really common. One's the slow burn and one is the crash. Jenny had the slow burn and I had the crash. So Jenny, do you want to talk about your particular faith shift, your slow burn?
Yes, I do. So kind of leaning into what Persephone said about faith, one thing I wanted to touch on is this concept of like faith in yourself versus faith in a religion. The other day, I was pulling cards for myself. It was from this same deck that I used today, and I got the faith card, and the message there just was really profound to me about this concept of faith, and it made me think about faith in context of religion, because while the card talked about having faith in yourself, having faith in the universe that it will support you, it took me back to this concept of faith in a religion where you are pretty much told to ignore your intuition, You're told to have faith in these leaders that are telling you what to do, what to think, what to say, how to behave. And even if there's some part of you that's telling you that that doesn't sound right, that doesn't feel right, you're just told to have faith, ignore your feelings, and just believe that what you're being told is the right way. And I feel like that's such a huge disservice, because once I started listening to my intuition, having faith in the universe and faith in just the process of life, my life just shifted so much. It's been such an amazing journey these past couple of years as I really like leaned in to my own faith in myself, I guess is maybe the best way of saying it. But knowing that as long as I listened to my intuition and listened to my gut, I have faith that the universe will support me, that I will be supported in what I need, and that oh that things will work out how they need to work out, even though there are rough times and there's uncertainty. I feel so much happier on this side of things, just having that faith. And for my faith shift, that, like Persephone said, it was kind of like this slow burn where I never really had faith in this belief system. I never had faith in this religion, but it really took me a long time to tell my loved ones, my family especially, that I didn't share their beliefs, I didn't share their faith. And that was really hard to do. There were a lot of consequences for me tied up in not believing. Like growing up as a teenager, I didn't have the space with my parents to tell them I didn't share their faith, because there was always these consequences tied to not following that faith that they wanted me to follow. So of course I want these privileges, that, you know, my parents said would be taken away if I didn't go to church, if I didn't do the church things. So that was a hard thing, in that it didn't allow me to find the faith in myself.
That sounds like that's all. This is very interesting to me. Like your take on faith is interesting to me. It's making me think about it in a different way. You're right. When we were in the church and they said just have faith, it's a little gaslighty. It's a way to just be like, well, maybe you feel this way inside, but don't worry, just don't do that. Don't listen to that. Just like put it on your shelf, forget about it. Like it feels a little gaslighty. You're right. And I hadn't really thought about it. But faith outside of religion is faith inside of yourself. So like I think that's interesting. Also, I find it interesting in your story that like you were part of a religion that was so controlling and your family used control to keep you in it, like punishing you for believing what you believe. A person can't help what they believe. You can't
Yeah,
punish someone into a certain belief system. It's, you know, or control someone. I mean, I suppose you can. High demand religion does it, but like it's not about what's good for you. It's
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
I'm not hearing you say they're like, oh, what do you believe? What can we do to help you? More just like punishing you for not being in their belief system. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know my parents meant well. They were doing what
Mhm.
they thought was best for me, but it also didn't allow me to find out who I was,
Mhm.
as a teenager. It didn't allow me to explore like my soul, my spirituality, because I had to believe their way. And it while their intentions were good, it definitely led to some like depression, and some other like mental health issues. Like I struggled with stuff, excuse me, I struggle words, boy, this doesn't want to come out, but I'm gonna make it come out.
Aw.
I struggled with self-harm as a teenager,
Aw.
because I felt like I didn't have control in other ways that I needed some control in my life, just not being able to have control over my own belief system and my own faith. So for me, that faith shift, it was definitely the slow burn where it took me until my like early to mid 20s to tell my parents that I no longer shared their faith. And
Aw.
it was absolutely devastating for them. My dad was okay. My mom was devastated, because in the belief system Persephone and I grew up in, basically, if your children leave the faith, you're a failure as a parent.
Yeah.
And it's such emotional blackmail.
Mhm.
on everyone involved. It's not fair to anyone. The children feel horrible for leaving. The parents feel horrible because they're told they're a failure.
Yep.
And
And that they lose their kids for all eternity and that's it, you know? Yeah. Which is
yeah,
like the worst thing that can a parent can hear, you know? Mm.
yeah, it is. It's I'm not a parent, but I know my mom was devastated, and it makes me sad that that's how it was for her. Because on this side of the, in well, backtracking to that night when I told my parents, and she's in tears, I said I can go for you and be miserable, or I can live my truth and be happy.
Oh,
And it's taken years to like fully live my truth, along with that slow burn of the faith shift. Um, it's taken years to finally get to a point where I can say I'm happy, where I can say like the depression and the anxiety are not as much of an issue as they have been in the past, because I've been able to live my truth.
oh,
Um, yeah,
that's
it's
amazing. That's huge. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. That's like some big, hard stuff. I think people that haven't been in a phase like that don't realize like the psychological toll that being in some like a institution like that that's hurting you can take on you. And like, I appreciate you sharing that. That's like vulnerable and beautiful. So thank you.
Oh,
Aw.
thanks. It's something that is. Uh, I mean, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but it served its purpose at a time, and it gave me that control that I needed at that time in my life. I'm not trying to glorify
Mhm.
it by any means, but
It
I
helped
didn't
you
have any
survive it.
resources.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you
100%.
survived it. So there we go. People
Yes,
survive
I
how they have
survived.
to survive. Yep.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Survived and thrived.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And like it took me, when I left the belief system and I left the faith, it wasn't something where I made an announcement to everyone in my family. I just kind of gradually told family members here and there. And one of my concerns in leaving this belief system is that I would be seen as a bad person. Because that's kind of how I was raised, or the mentality I was raised with in this belief system in the area. It's very black and white. It's, if you're a member of the church, you're good. If you're not, you're bad. There's no in between.
Right.
And so I knew that if I left, I would be bad. And I had this fear that my siblings wouldn't trust me with my nieces and nephews anymore, just because I didn't share their faith. And to some degree, with some of the siblings that happened, it hasn't like lasted. Well, that's a deeper
Oh
topic.
no. Mhm.
But for the most part, they realize that I just want what's best for my nieces and nephews, and I love them, and I don't want my nieces and nephews to have those same struggles that I had, because I didn't have that space to find myself when I was younger.
Oh, your nieces and nephews are so lucky to have you. Like it's so nice. I bet they know they have like a really safe space for when they faith shift because probably some of them will. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they will, and I know some of them have amazing parents that are much more open about different beliefs than mine were. So I'm so thankful for that they have that.
Yeah.
But for those that aren't, I want to be there for them.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, Persephone,
Oh,
I'd love to
so
hear more about
beautiful.
your faith shift.
Well, mine was the crash variety.
Yes.
So my friend Kirsten is the one who gave me the phrase crash, and I was like, I don't think there's any better word for what that felt like. I was just I was struggling. I was kind of doubling down. I was getting little intuitive messages that I should like take some time off church and stuff. And I'm like, nope, I don't take time off church. And, I was like 40. So I was like old. I'd been in the church for a long time. And one day I just went to my little writing studio and I just opened the New York Times before I started writing just to like catch up on news or whatever. And they had this article that said the church was thinking about excommunicating Kate Kelly and John Dehlin for speaking
Mm.
up for women's voices in the church and for supporting and loving LGBTQ people exactly as they are. And I just read that article, and like excommunication, as but some of the viewers might not know, it's kind of like spiritual death penalty. They like kick you out of the church and you lose your place in heaven and blah blah blah. It's like death penalty for all eternity. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Yep.
it's like the worst thing they do. I think they call it a different thing now, something with love in it or something, but it's that. Um,
Yeah.
but I remember just like sitting there in that little red plastic IKEA chair at my desk and just thinking, oh no, I am in a narcissist organization and I think I'm in a cult. And like, just like it just came to me like the second I read that article, and I just all of a sudden broke down and I just started sobbing, and like it's like the scales were falling off my eyes about my whole entire life. And I was like, oh no, I think I just gave my life to a cult. And like it was so distressing and upsetting. I was like shaking and sick, and like it was just horrible. And I wasn't okay for weeks. I would shake if I went near a Mormon church. I lived in Salt Lake City, so I was always near a Mormon
Every
church.
corner.
Yeah. And I just could not bear to be near one. Like I made myself go to church one more time after my crash, and I was teaching Sunday school at the time for 12 and 13-year-olds, and I loved those kids. They were great. But the lesson I was assigned to teach was on the priesthood. And I remember one of the girls talking about Kate Kelly in the class, and she's like, my mom says Satan is tempting women all over the world to ask for the priesthood. And I was like,
That is
really?
heartbreaking.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, what am I doing here? And I was just like, I can tell her that her mom is full of shit, which I won't. You know, I was like, or I could just lie and go against my conscience and say, like, I'm glad your mom cares about you. Or I don't know. I didn't know what to do. Like, I just kind of sat there. So I just pulled out paper and crowns and we colored and talked.
Mm.
And then when it was over, I just walked out of that church and I never walked back. And that was like 10 years ago. And I was just like, that's it, you know. It did take me about 2 years of like super intense dismantling, and I did it publicly, um because I knew something was happening to me, even though I didn't know what a faith shift was. I knew something was like transforming, but I didn't know what was happening. So I would post about it sometimes, and be reasonably open about it. I mean, I kept a journal where I talked about the private stuff, but like I would sometimes talk about, because I just felt like the people in the church know me, that I'm not lazy and wanting to sin. Like, if they think that about me, they're not being honest about me. And like, I'm not perfect. You know, no one's perfect or anything, but like, I'm not lazy and wanting to sin.
No,
You
that
know?
is,
So I
yeah,
have
that's,
other faults. Yeah.
yeah. I was told that same thing by one of my siblings when I left. Is his comment was most people leave the church because they want to sin, not the lazy part, but they want to sin. And I'm
Mm.
it's just no, no, that's not it. Have you talked to people who
Yeah.
have left, or is this just what you're being told because you have faith in these people that are telling you to think that?
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I just wanted to be open because I knew there was other people going through this stuff too. And I don't know, I just did it. But for me, it was very much like one of my best friends once said, because she went through the faith shift at the same time I did. And but she went through it privately and a little more slow burn like you. But she said, yeah, it's like one day you just wake up and all of a sudden you realize you don't believe, and then you just read everything about it and you just dismantle, and it's like so hard and anguishing. And then about 2 years later, you wake up and go, huh, I was in a cult. And then you get on with your day. I was like, that is like super accurate.
uh,
That's like
that
pretty much how it went, you know?
yeah. So your crash and burn moment just sounds so intense. Like that would be so devastating to just have like the tower come crumbling down, um, just collapsing. I'm part of me is thankful I didn't have to deal with that because I feel like that just sounds so overwhelming. Um, but I also feel like sometimes people need that like abrupt kick in the pants to kind of open up their eyes and make them see what's going on.
I do tend to be a kind of person who just like sees the whole picture all of a sudden and learns in like flashes and epiphanies. And like I'm not like very good at astrology. That's not my wheelhouse as far as spirituality, but I have a friend that's really good at it, and I have a whole bunch of eighth houses in my chart, and those are usually the crash and burn like there, like tower card things, and I'm like, yeah, that's
Oh,
pretty much been my life. But like so, but that is how my faith shift went, and it just was how it was, you know. I do
yeah,
think it took about 7 years to totally dismantle, but I think it took 2 years of like a lot of work. The rest of it was like bits and pieces. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
yeah. But
That, thank you for sharing your story. That's just, it's interesting to see how, yeah, how different those faith shifts can be. And I know these are only like two stories of
Mhm. Of
millions of people
millions, yeah.
and different beliefs. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing to look back and see how far we've both come from like those days when we met. Um, So when you hear the term faith, just faith in general, do you feel like where would you say you place your faith these days? I don't know if that's a fair question to ask, but if you have thoughts on that, I would love to hear it.
That's really interesting. I feel like if you asked that 2 days ago, I might have had a different answer. I probably a few days ago would have said I had a complicated relationship with that. I definitely have like trust issues with the universe. I have a lot of trauma in my life, and like I've worked through a lot of it, but I'm still learning what safety and trust and faith are, like what it even feels like, you know? I had this experience yesterday that was like really kind of profound. I was like in my car just driving, and I just had this little flash. See, I get things in flashes and epiphanies. It's just how it comes to me. But like I saw kind of like the scope of my life and the things that I've been through, and it kind of floored me. Like I know I've had it hard. Lots of people have it hard. That's nothing different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I kind of saw the scope of how hard it was, and I was like really shaken. Like it kind of kicked me in the head, and I wasn't like expecting, like, I don't know, it's opened my eyes in a way. Like I could experience it in a whole new level that I couldn't before. And with that came another epiphany of like, I'm well, and like, how did I do this? Like, how did I get well? You know, I mean, everybody, including myself, always has healing to do. There's always work to do. That's totally fine. That's being human. It's beautiful. But like, I maybe shouldn't be as well as I am for the things that I've gone through. And I was like, you know, what I can trust is myself. And like what I can have faith in is myself, because I've shown up for me for a decade to do this work, and I've worked hard at it, and I've done a good job at it, and I felt a little in awe of myself, and that is not my normal way. I'm rough on myself, you know. Um
Yeah.
and so I feel like when you were talking about faith, I just kept thinking of that epiphany. I'm like, I think I can actually have faith in myself because I will show up for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I will say that's a brand new epiphany, 1 day old. So I'm going to have to explore that more and try it out more and see how it feels. But it came with a feeling of big peace too. So yeah.
Mm, that's so sweet. I love it. Oh, I just had a thought and it's gone, as it tends to go with me. But well, it's back. You mentioned, like that you feel like you should kind of have more trauma or be a different person because of what you've experienced. But I think that like you are where you're at in life because you're so intent on healing. You you are a healer, and even though you've been through these hard things, I feel like there's just this part of your soul that knows how to heal, um, no matter what, because that's part of who you are as a healer.
I mean, I think so. So, and I don't mean that immodestly or braggy or anything, but it is like how I look at the world, I think. And so,
Yeah.
even the hard stuff I know can be useful to me if I navigate it the best way possible for myself. Do you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
but I would sure love less Buffy.
Oh, yeah, I get what you're saying about like the hard stuff, getting stuff or learning from the hard stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like that's where a lot of like the growth
Yeah.
in life comes from. If everything was just, easy peasy, uh, there wouldn't be much substance to life. It's when we face those challenges and how we respond and how we deal with it.
Mhm.
That's how we grow. That's how we learn, and that's where wisdom comes from.
It's true. And I feel like that's also how we are like empathetic members of the human race, because everybody has their tales of woe and everybody has their traumas. I think there's not a person on this earth that doesn't have some traumas, whether they are aware or not. And that's like one thing we have in common is, you know, being in this world, and there's troubles in here. And I don't mean that negatively, like, well, the one thing we have in common is trouble and pain. Like, I don't mean that, but it helps us to have empathy for the human condition. And that's like a beautiful thing, I think. So,
Yeah, there are so many experiences, like humanity. It's universal experiences. It's that pain,
mhm.
it's that suffering, it's happy, it's sad,
Yep.
and everything in between, all the emotions and all the feelings.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, I feel like how we respond to that trauma and how we learn and grow from it is where, oh gosh, what am I even trying to say? That's how we let it define us. I think is the major outcome there.
Mhm.
Um,
It's true, and it's also useful when we get to the other side. Like I use my faith shift usefully as a tool all the time. Like if I'm going through something difficult and it feels like I'm never going to get through it, I'm like, remember when you were Mormon and you like really believed it, and then you took years and then you're like a completely different person? Like you got this one too. You got this. And
yes,
so like if
that's
I made it through
amazing.
that, I can make it through this. And so I
Yes,
like use that all the time. So
I think that's amazing.
so
Um, that is so powerful. That is really powerful.
because I feel like when you're in a faith shift, it just feels eternal. And you're just because you don't actually have any frame of reference on what's on the other side. Like you and I, we actually had never lived outside of the church or never like lived a normal human life outside of like a cult like faith. Um, so we had a lot to learn. And
Yes, we did.
so it just seemed like it would be eternal, but it wasn't. Like we got through it, you know?
Yeah. And that's just, yeah, the growth that comes along with like being willing to acknowledge that, hey, maybe my faith is misplaced.
Yep.
Maybe I need to examine where I'm putting my energy and who I'm believing in and what I'm being told. Is this what I really believe? Or is this what I'm being told? You need to believe this because I tell you to believe it.
Exactly. And I don't know about you. I want to know about this from you. Um, but I feel like for me, my faith shift, I just came back to the person I was like probably when I was little, you know. I took this selfie of myself a few months ago. I was like sitting on the porch. I was like smoking a joint and it was like watching the full moon rise, you know. And I just like propped the camera on the porch railing and just took a selfie, not thinking anything, you know, kind of recording the moment. And I
I know
looked
what
at it.
picture you're talking about. I can,
Yes.
yeah,
And I
yes,
just
that's a
looked
great
at it and
picture.
I'm like, oh my God, that I was I'm the person that I wanted to be like when I was a teenager, the person I knew I should grow up to be. Like my inner teenager knew it. You know, she
Yes.
wasn't well, she was in that church. There's like she had troubles and stuff, but she saw and like I don't know, I felt like I freaking love that picture of me, not because I look so amazing or something, but just because I look like myself. Like I looked like the person I'm supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. I love
Mm.
that.
So I feel like the faith shift just like pulled me right back to myself and then just let me go from there, you know? How
Yeah.
about you? Like, how did that happen for you? Were you always yourself or what was that like for you?
No, that is so funny that you bring this up. The other night, I was talking to my mom on the phone, And I'm the youngest of 8. And in this phone call, I asked my mom, if you had to describe each of your children in like a few words, how would you describe them? So we're going through my siblings. She's thinking of them and has few words for each sibling to describe them. And when she got to me, she said, like, you were such a happy child. Like when you were young, you were the happiest kid, you were the happiest baby. And that is not the case when I was a teenager. I was, like I mentioned, I struggled with depression. I struggled with self-harm. I was not a happy teenager.
Mhm.
So like getting to that point where I can live my truth, that has brought me happiness. I feel like I've got a kitty here wants to might come up and say hi. Um, he I feel like I'm getting to that point of like getting in touch with little Jenny back when she was that happy little girl. And it's so empowering to discover that inner child again and get in touch with like that soul piece of who you are.
Yes.
I feel like there is that part of us that's always going to be who we are.
Mhm.
And it's the circumstances and the trauma and life, and how we respond to things and the tools that we have that kind of allow us to either return to that or deviate from it.
Mhm.
Um, and so I feel like, yeah, I'm definitely coming more back in tune with like that inner child. And the other night I had a moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, if my teenage self could see me now, she would be like amazed. I was, so as a teenager, I was obsessed with the movie Titanic,
That's
loved
so
it.
cute.
And oh, the other night I had the Titanic soundtrack going. I had smoked a
Oh,
little weed and I was pulling cards for myself. And I was just like,
oh,
yeah, teenage Jenny would just be like, yeah, that's amazing.
oh my
Because
God.
that was, yeah, maybe not the weed as a teenager, but like just listening to
Right.
the Titanic soundtrack and pulling cards. It was so simple, but it was so empowering for me just to think, I'm doing this. This is my life now. And I can make this sounds silly. I can make these choices for me that
Yes.
just bring me happiness, that happiness that I had as a child.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And also, you bring up a really good point, too, where one gift I think about faith shifting is that you just don't take anything for granted on the outside of fundamentalism. Like you just having that moment with the cards and things. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's those moments where you're almost like euphorically free. And like, someone who hasn't been in a situation where they were controlled on that level may not quite understand like the significance of that. Like, um, it just, it's really just, I don't know. It's like everything is always new and fresh, and like your freedom is always at the forefront. You always feel it because it's like novel, it's different. Even after 10 years, it's still like novel to be free to do as we please and live how we want?
Yeah, absolutely. It is,
Mhm.
that is so true. And it's just like, while the path here is hard to
Mhm.
get to that point, like return to that inner child, having faith in the process, like having faith in yourself is just so critical. Like your soul and your spirit, they know what's best for you. They know what you need. And during the process, it's so easy to get swept up in the hustle and bustle of life and family and friends and just everything.
Mhm.
So finding that faith and returning that faith back to you is just, it's critical to living your truth.
Oh, I just think that's beautiful. Um, sorry, I'm like looking at our little notes too. So I'm just seeing what else we wanted to talk about around this because this is just like a beautiful topic and I love it. And one thing I think is kind of funny is like, when they give you threats about leaving the church and stuff in the church, they're like, well, your life will fall apart and it will be so hard and so bad and all this stuff. And like, they're not wrong. It does. But they are wrong that it's because of sadness. The thing is like when you go through a faith shift, you have to dismantle everything you built your life on before so you can build up something that actually works for you. And so like the narratives that we heard growing up, even the lazy and wanting to sin, I don't want to pull off a summer camp every year for 200 teenage girls and not get paid and stuff anymore. You know what I mean? I don't want to go to
What?
seminary and hours of church and all that stuff, like for free. And like, I, maybe that's lazy, but I don't want to do that. And also wanting to sin, if they mean like having a cup of coffee in the morning, or like having a grown up relationship with a partner that you're not married to, or just, you know what I mean, just having a cup of tea or a cocktail, um,
Yeah.
then yeah, of course I do. Like, I'm a regular human. Of course I want to do those things. So call that wanting to sin? Sure.
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
So
sinning because you're not having faith in them anymore. And that's the ultimate sin, right?
yes,
That you're not drinking
that's
their
right.
Kool-Aid.
Yes.
Yeah, it's oh, stepping away from those little rules to keep you stuck in the faith.
hmm
It's hard. It is so hard to like let that go. When you've been raised with it and it's been hammered into you.
It's
Um,
true. But then you start seeing it more and more as tactics, like, because you're like, a healthy faith would be like, oh, I'm just so glad you found happiness, whatever that looks like for you. You know what I mean? But an unhealthy one would be like, well, you're going to hell forever. And like, so I don't know, like, it's a little bit helpful when they talk like that, because you can see, like, wow, that's like so unhealthy. So it is good that I left.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, and going back to your comment about people thinking, bad things are going to happen to you because you leave the church or you leave the faith. Like I remember having that fear too of not wanting to tell people because if something bad happened to me, they were going to think it's because, leaving the faith.
Yeah.
That's what they think. But I had this was years ago, probably 20 years ago with my sister. I think it was around the time Hurricane Katrina hit. Because we were
No.
talking about that and love my sister. She's come a long way from this line of thinking, but she made a comment that the hurricane was because people were being wicked. And so, and I'm just like, that was just horrible to me. Like, she's definitely not that same person with that thought of that's God punishing the wicked. But
Oof.
when you look at it from the other perspective, when something bad happens in a faithful area, it's a test of faith.
That's right. God is testing you, and you can be
Yeah.
valiant and go through it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
And
like whatever narrative they want to say. Yeah.
yeah, and it's heartbreaking that that's kind of that mindset of that narrative can be spun any way to kind of fit their views, to fit their faith, to fit their belief.
And I
Um,
also think that's why, even though the church seems to have like a big fear of people like us, like we would be excommunicated for doing this podcast. This is like the ultimate sin for sure.
yep.
As you can tell, we're super wicked. So, but like,
You can't see all the baby body parts back behind my
oh
camera that I
gosh.
had to sacrifice and eat for dinner.
That's right. But oh man, I already lost what I was gonna say. Oh no.
Sorry.
What was it? Oh shit. I
um,
just like totally lost it. You were talking about your sister. Um
yeah, and it's either a
Spinning
test
the
of faith.
narrative. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
I was gonna say that's why, like, even though the church forbids people to talk to us, or like discourages people from talking to us because like faith shifts might be contagious or something, but like your sister's reasoning, like, that's why you can't actually give a faith shift to someone. You cannot explain, like, to someone in a cult that they're in a cult. They can't hear it because you're trained to spin the narratives however you want. So like, that's the one thing about a faith shift is like, one of the things is people often like really want to tell their family and loved ones, like, look what I've learned, look at these things that I've learned, and want to share it. But like, it just, you got to focus on yourself, because it's not going to
Yeah.
go in here, because it's not contagious. A faith shift starts in here, not on facts and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel
Mhm.
like you're trying to um, educate family
Right.
members or loved ones on what you found. It usually has the opposite effect. They just dig
Yeah,
in harder because they don't
that's
want to
right.
hear it. They're not ready to hear it. It absolutely is something that needs to come from within. Because if you're not ready to hear it, you're just
Yep.
going to block it out and dig in your heels.
It's true. And also, just like you want to be respected where you are, we just have to respect them where they are. And it's just like they are where they are in their journey. We are where we are in our journey. And so like it's not for us to like change that. It's for them to go on their journey, whatever that's gonna look like. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up, that idea of respect.
Mhm.
Um, and this might be a topic for another day, but for me, I learned that respect is not a two-way street in this belief system.
No.
Um,
Oh no,
it's
no.
no, it's not. It is okay for them. Well, sorry, that sounds very bad. Their beliefs can be shared as loud as they want, but as soon as, like, if I was to try to share my beliefs with my family, or just be as vocal as they are about their beliefs with my beliefs,
Right.
oh my gosh, the drama that would ensue, when it
Yeah.
comes to, like, them sharing their beliefs. It's just kind of like you just smile and grin and just, okay, that's fine. And yeah, it's
Yep.
definitely not that two-way street. They don't see it as disrespect,
Mm-mm.
but it's the trying to save your soul,
Yeah.
and that's how they view it, but that's definitely not how I view it.
Yep. And I think that like I noticed that a lot when I left the church. I'm like, oh, there's so many times I was super disrespectful when I tried to like missionary people back into the church, or like I thought that I was doing the loving thing, but really I was like dishonoring their journey. And that is like super disrespectful. And that was like a hard pill to swallow, because I'm like, oh, I could think of so many people that I did not appreciate where they were on their journey. And do you know what I mean? I just didn't
Yeah.
know. And I learned that just from my own faith shift, when people would like always be bearing their testimonies at me and just like always like sharing their like, well, you're going through a faith shift. Well, here's this sacred thing that happened to me, or here's this. I'm like, well, how about asking if I'm okay? You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, like checking in
yeah,
rather than trying to bring me back. It's such a deeper issue
yes,
than come on
yeah.
back. There's so much inner turmoil surrounding it.
And and I think too, you just have to come at it with empathy. And I don't know if you actually can if you're in a cult all the way. I remember when I first left too, I was just in such distress. And I know everyone could tell I was just like super distressed about it. And I just it was just a lot. And then like a couple days later, I get this card from my dad with like a picture of the temple. And I'm like, okay, well, it's weird that there's a picture of the temple on this, but like that's very sweet of my dad to know I'm suffering. You know what I mean? And I opened the card and it was just like, listen to the words of Paul and blah, 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 and like quoting scriptures. And I'm like,
Um,
oh my God, like, this is like the worst thing that someone could say. Like, it makes it so much worse. And it just underlines why I got to get out of here. And do you know what I mean? And just like, it just
yeah,
completely lacked empathy of any kind. And it was just like, I could just feel his distress about where I am in my journey. It's, and unlike what we're taught in the church, it's really no one's business where someone is with their spirituality in the church or outside of the church. Do you know what I mean? But
hmm,
we're taught that it's like community property, but it's not. And like we just
it's
have
not.
to have empathy about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I when I was cleaning house for my move, I came across something similar. This letter from my mom that she um wrote to me shortly after I let her know I didn't believe in the church anymore. And it's just the same thing, these same concepts of I'm going to try to convert you back and change your mind, and it doesn't work that way. Like
Mm-mm.
you can't close the box once it's been opened. You can't go back in the
Mm-mm.
cave after you stepped out.
Yep. That's like, I always give the analogy like one day you wake up and all of a sudden you can see the color blue. You were colorblind before, you can see the color blue now. And like it doesn't matter how you squint your eyes or how you do it, like you just see blue. You cannot help it. You can't undo it. It's just the way it is. And like no amount of scripturing or punishing or abuse or kindly meant testimonies can change that. It does.
Shaming.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
doesn't like that's not how it works. So the best thing to say to a person in a faith shift is like, how are you? What can I do for you? Would you like to talk to me about it? And then just like for real listen.
Yeah. Yep. That is absolutely right. It is hard and it's scary to listen to someone else's
Yep.
beliefs.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important to have faith in yourself. Because
Mhm.
if you know where you stand, whatever someone else says, it's not going to affect you. You're going to be able to listen to them with empathy and
Yes.
an open heart, and it won't affect your beliefs and your standing because
Right.
you know your truth.
I will say the best example I've ever seen of that from a Mormon, I was so impressed. It was like a couple of years ago. I was at my friend Laura's house and we were having dinner. She and I are both ex-Mormons. We met at church when we were teenagers, and I was at her house and we were having dinner and the sister missionaries show up. And like I guess they just kind of invited him in. I don't remember why or anything, but like the sister missionaries were asking about like where we are with the church, and we're like, okay, sit down and we'll tell you. And we told them all of our things about the church. Like we were just like way honest. And those girls sat and they listened and they didn't, like, if they judged, they kept it to themselves, and they seemed to like hear us and listen the whole time, did not try to do anything about it, just heard it, and then was polite about it. And then when it's time to go, they went. And I'm like, okay, like that is a first. So I was
That's
like
amazing.
impressed.
Yeah,
So
that
yeah.
is rare. That is so rare to find someone of like such strong convictions that they'll actually take the time to listen to your, I don't
Yep.
know. Yeah. I was gonna say like bashing because
But it
that's almost,
wasn't. It was just
yeah,
like
like,
saying,
well,
yeah.
and I didn't mean that about you. Like I'm just thinking in my own instances where like even just I feel like I've said stuff that's just truth or my, yeah, and it's seen as bashing because
Yes. Yes.
it doesn't align with their narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
just, yeah. So that's, yeah, I boy. It's, faith is a funny thing. Faith is a
Yep.
funny thing.
It is. And it's very interesting how it's just like, also too, when you're in the church, it's a one size fits all. So this is the one truth
Mhm.
for the whole world, and like this is how it is. This is the one
Yep.
prophet, the one way, straight and narrow, iron rod, not flexible or not malleable or anything. But like out in the real world, it's like broad and expansive, and it's like individual, and there are billions of people on this earth. So there's billions of ways to be spiritual or not spiritual, or just like live your authentic truth. And like I like it that way.
I do too. I
Yeah.
like living in that grayscale and that not that black and white
Mhm.
thinking. The world becomes so much richer and your experiences are just that much better because you have the space, you have like that
Mhm.
bandwidth to have empathy for other people and meet them on their level.
Yep. And it's like a beautiful thing that people are just where they are. Like that's nice. Like it's, you know what I mean? And so I don't know. I think that's cool.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, I think this has been a wonderful discussion and maybe time to wrap up. But I know one thing we mentioned on our last episode is talking about our spiritual histories. I know we're still kind of playing with that idea. That's something we do want to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just something we kind of need to piece out there. That's a very in-depth topic for both of us. I'm realizing as we've been chatting.
Yeah. It is. And that may be a few episodes worth of things. We might have to break those down into sections or something, but we'll figure that out. So
Yes, we will. Well, thank you everyone for
thank
watching.
you. And feel free to subscribe and show up anytime. We love to have you here. Take care.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.